My name is Sarah. I'm 28 years old, and I always believed my parents loved me and my sister equally. Growing up, they told us family comes first, that we'd always support each other through everything. But when my wedding day approached and I discovered the shocking truth about how much money they'd secretly spent on my sister versus what they were willing to give me, everything I thought I knew about my family crumbled. What happened next exposed a 28-year pattern of favoritism so devastating that I'm still processing it with my therapist. If you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your family, this story might help you feel less alone. Let me take you back to the beginning, because understanding my family dynamics is crucial to grasping just how deep this betrayal ran. I'm the older sister by 3 years. My sister Emma has always been what you'd call the golden child, though I didn't fully recognize it until recently. She was the one who got dance lessons, piano lessons, and expensive summer camps while I was told we needed to budget more carefully. When she struggled in high school, my parents hired expensive tutors and even considered private school. When I struggled with the same subjects 2 years earlier, I was told I needed to work harder and figure it out myself. But here's the thing about growing up in a family with subtle favoritism. You normalize it. You tell yourself your parents are just responding to different needs, different personalities. Emma was more outgoing, more social, needed more support. I was the responsible one, the independent one, so naturally I required less attention. That's how they framed it, and that's how I accepted it for most of my life. The pattern became clearer during our college years. Emma chose an expensive private liberal arts college across the country. My parents not only paid her full tuition, but also covered her living expenses, spring break trips, and even helped her start a small business during her junior year that ultimately failed. When it was my turn for college, suddenly the conversation was all about financial responsibility and the value of public education. I attended our state university, took out student loans, and worked 25 hours a week at a campus bookstore to cover my living expenses. When Emma graduated, my parents threw her an elaborate party at a country club with over 100 guests. When I graduated summa cum laude with my nursing degree, we had cake at home with immediate family. I remember my mom saying they were keeping it low-key because Emma's graduation party had been so expensive and they needed to be more mindful of spending. I accepted this explanation because by then, accepting less had become my normal. After college, the patterns continued but became more sophisticated. Emma moved to New York City to pursue her artistic dreams. My parents helped her with rent for the first 2 years, co-signed her lease, and even bought her furniture for her trendy Brooklyn apartment. When she decided to start her own jewelry design business, they provided initial funding of $15,000 as an investment in her future. When I bought my first small condo as a working nurse, saving every penny for the down payment over 3 years, I asked my parents if they could help with closing costs, just $3,000. They told me homeownership was a personal responsibility, and they were proud of me for doing it independently. I should mention that during this time, I was also the daughter who visited every weekend, who remembered birthdays and anniversaries, who took care of my parents when they were sick. When my dad had his heart attack 2 years ago, I used all my vacation time to stay with them and coordinate his care. Emma visited twice during his recovery, both times planning her trips around New York social events she didn't want to miss. Yet somehow, she remained the daughter they worried about, the one who needed their support and protection. This brings us to last year, when I got engaged to Michael, a wonderful man I'd been dating for 4 years. Michael is a teacher, steady and kind, someone who appreciates my independence and strength. When we announced our engagement, my parents seemed genuinely happy. My mother immediately started talking about wedding planning, asking about our budget and timeline. I explained that Michael and I were planning a modest celebration, maybe 75 guests, a simple venue, nothing too elaborate. We'd been saving for 2 years and had a budget of about $20,000 for the entire wedding. That's when the conversation took an unexpected turn. My mother asked if we needed any financial help, which surprised me given our family's history around money and my supposed independence. I mentioned that we were doing fine with our budget, but wouldn't turn down any contribution they wanted to make. She said they'd think about it and get back to us. I was cautiously optimistic. Maybe this would be the moment when they showed they valued me as much as Emma. A few weeks later, my parents took Michael and me to dinner to discuss their wedding gift. They seemed nervous, which was unusual. Finally, my father explained that they wanted to contribute to our special day, but needed to be practical about their budget. They offered us $5,000 toward the wedding, which they emphasized was a very generous gift that represented a significant financial commitment for them. They stressed that we should use it wisely and that they hoped we understood they couldn't afford to do more. I was genuinely grateful. $5,000 was substantial and would allow us to upgrade several aspects of our celebration. I thanked them warmly and told them how much it meant to us. My mother seemed relieved by my response, commenting that she was glad I was being reasonable about money, unlike some brides who have unrealistic expectations. Planning continued over the next few months. Every purchase was carefully considered within our budget. When I found my wedding dress, a beautiful but simple design that cost $200 on sale, I excitedly showed my mother the photos. Her reaction was immediate and harsh. She said $200 seemed expensive for a dress I'd only wear once, especially when we were already getting such generous financial help from them. She suggested I look at consignment shops or maybe borrow something. Her tone made it clear she thought I was being wasteful and ungrateful. This reaction stung, but I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was right. Maybe $200 was too much for a single-use dress. I ended up finding another dress for $90 that I liked well enough, though it wasn't quite what I'd envisioned for my wedding day. When I told my mother about the less expensive option, she seemed pleased and commented that I was finally learning to be practical about money. Around this time, Emma announced her own engagement to David, a finance guy she'd been dating for about 18 months. The family reaction was immediate and overwhelming. My parents were thrilled, calling it a fairy tale romance, and immediately starting to plan what they called the wedding of Emma's dreams. Within days, my mother was researching venues, florists, and photographers for Emma's celebration. I was happy for Emma, of course, but I couldn't help noticing the stark difference in enthusiasm and energy my parents brought to her wedding planning versus mine. When I'd gotten engaged, the conversation was about budgets and being practical. When Emma got engaged, the conversation was about making dreams come true and creating magical memories that would last a lifetime. The real shock came about 6 weeks before my own wedding. Michael and I were having dinner with my parents when Emma called, excited to share details about her wedding planning. She put the call on speaker, and for the next hour I listened to my sister describe the most elaborate wedding I could imagine. The venue alone, a historic estate with formal gardens, cost more than Michael's and my entire budget. She talked about designer flowers, a 12-piece band, custom invitations, and a dress that cost more than my car. I tried to stay focused on being happy for her, but something wasn't adding up. Emma had always been financially irresponsible, and David, while successful, had been saving for a house down payment. Where was the money for this extravaganza coming from? When I casually asked Emma how they were managing such an expensive celebration, she laughed and said our parents were being incredibly generous, that they'd told her not to worry about money because they wanted her to have the perfect wedding. After Emma hung up, I sat in stunned silence. My parents had given me $5,000 with multiple speeches about their financial limitations and my need to be practical, yet they were apparently funding an unlimited wedding budget for Emma. When I gently asked how they could afford such different levels of support for our weddings, my mother became defensive immediately. She said Emma's situation was different, that she had different needs and expectations. She emphasized that $5,000 was still a very generous gift, and I should be grateful rather than comparing myself to my sister. My father chimed in that Emma had always been more social, and that a big wedding was more important to her than it was to me. He said they were giving each of us what we needed, not necessarily equal amounts. I left that dinner feeling hurt and confused, but I tried to accept their explanation. Maybe they were right. Maybe Emma did need more support, and maybe I should focus on gratitude for what I'd received. But over the next few weeks, as Emma shared more details about her wedding plans, I started keeping a mental tally of the costs involved. The numbers were staggering. The venue rental alone was $12,000. The catering for 300 guests was another $25,000. The flowers were $8,000. The band was $6,000. The photography package was $4,000. Her dress was $3,000. The rehearsal dinner at an upscale restaurant was another $8,000. When I added up just the major expenses Emma had mentioned casually in conversation, I reached over $65,000. $65,000. My parents had stressed their financial limitations while giving me $5,000, yet they were spending 13 times that amount on Emma's wedding. The disparity was so enormous that I couldn't process it rationally. I began questioning whether I had misunderstood something, whether there was some explanation that would make this make sense. I decided to have a direct conversation with my mother. I chose my words carefully, expressing that I wasn't trying to be ungrateful for their gift to Michael and me, but that I was confused about the apparent difference in wedding budgets. I asked if there was something I was missing, some explanation for why Emma's celebration seemed so much more expensive than what they'd described as their financial capacity. My mother's response was swift and cutting. She said I was being selfish and jealous, that comparing wedding expenses was petty and inappropriate. She reminded me that Emma had always had different needs, and that as parents, they had to make different decisions for different children. She said she was disappointed in my attitude and that my focus should be on my own happiness rather than monitoring what they chose to do for Emma. But then she said something that revealed more than she intended. She mentioned that Emma's wedding was an investment in her future, that David came from a prominent family, and this celebration would be important for Emma's social and professional connections. She said my wedding was more about love and commitment, which didn't require expensive staging. The implication was clear. Emma's marriage had social and economic value that mine didn't. Emma's future was worth investing in. Mine was not. That conversation happened 3 weeks before my wedding. I spent those 3 weeks trying to focus on my own celebration, trying to be grateful for what I had, rather than resentful about what I didn't have. Michael was supportive but also confused by my family's behavior. He gently pointed out that the disparity seemed extreme and hurtful, but he encouraged me to focus on our relationship rather than my parents' choices. My wedding day was beautiful in its own way. The venue was modest but lovely, the flowers were simple but elegant, and most importantly, I was marrying someone who truly loved and valued me. Emma attended with David, looking stunning and already planning details for her own celebration just 2 months away. My parents seemed genuinely happy during the ceremony and reception, and I allowed myself to believe that maybe I'd been overthinking everything. But 2 days after my wedding, I discovered the truth that changed everything. I was at my parents' house helping my mother with some post-wedding cleanup when she stepped away to take a phone call. Her laptop was open on the kitchen counter, and I could see her email inbox displayed. I wasn't trying to snoop, but one email subject line caught my attention: wedding payment confirmation. Emma Johnson, $12,000. $12,000 for a single wedding vendor. I stood there staring at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. Against my better judgment, I glanced at the other emails in her inbox. What I saw made my stomach drop. Payment confirmations, receipt acknowledgments, vendor communications, all for Emma's wedding. As I scanned the subject lines, I could see the scale of spending more clearly than ever before. Florist payment, $8,500. Catering deposit, $15,000. Band contract payment, $6,000. Venue final payment, $12,000. But the email that stopped my heart was from my parents' financial advisor, dated just 1 week earlier. The subject line read, Estate distribution, early inheritance, Emma Johnson, $45,000. I clicked on it before I could stop myself. The email explained that my parents had decided to give Emma an early portion of her inheritance to help with wedding expenses and her new life with David. The advisor was confirming the transfer of $45,000 from their estate account to Emma's personal account, noting that this would be deducted from her final inheritance distribution. $45,000. They had given Emma an early inheritance of $45,000 for her wedding, while telling me that $5,000 represented a significant financial stretch for them. I heard my mother's footsteps returning and quickly stepped away from the laptop, my mind reeling. $45,000? Not only had they spent nearly 10 times more on Emma's wedding than mine, but they had also given her access to inheritance money that presumably I would also be entitled to eventually, but which they had never offered to me. The conversation from weeks earlier suddenly made horrible sense. When my mother had said Emma's wedding was an investment in her future, she wasn't just talking about social connections. They were literally investing more money in Emma's future than they had ever invested in mine. They had given her early access to inheritance funds that could have helped me with my student loans, my mortgage, or my own future, but they had never even mentioned this as a possibility for me. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd discovered. The financial disparity was crushing, but what hurt more was the realization of what it represented. My parents hadn't just given Emma more money, they had fundamentally valued her future more than mine. They had seen her marriage as worthy of extraordinary investment, while seeing mine as something that should be done modestly and practically. I wrestled with whether to confront them about what I'd learned. Part of me wanted to pretend I'd never seen those emails, to protect the fragile peace we'd maintained around my wedding. But another part of me knew I couldn't continue our relationship based on this level of deception and inequality. I decided to talk to Michael first. When I told him what I'd discovered, his reaction was immediate and strong. He was furious on my behalf, pointing out that this wasn't just about money, it was about respect, honesty, and basic fairness. He encouraged me to have a direct conversation with my parents, to at least give them a chance to explain or acknowledge what they'd done. So 3 weeks after my wedding and 1 week before Emma's, I asked my parents to have dinner with Michael and me. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say, trying to find words that were honest but not accusatory. I started by thanking them again for their contribution to our wedding, emphasizing how much we appreciated their support. Then I took a deep breath and said I needed to discuss something that had been troubling me. I explained that I had inadvertently seen some emails on my mother's laptop and that I now understood the true scope of their financial support for Emma's wedding. I said I wasn't trying to cause drama or demand equal treatment, but that I was hurt by what felt like a significant disparity in how they valued our respective futures. The reaction was immediate and defensive. My mother accused me of snooping, of violating their privacy, and of being ungrateful for what they'd given me. My father said I was causing unnecessary drama right before Emma's wedding, and that my timing was selfish and inappropriate. They both emphasized that their financial decisions were private and that I had no right to question how they chose to spend their money. But I pressed on. I asked specifically about the early inheritance distribution, whether this was something that had ever been considered for me, whether they viewed Emma's future as more valuable than mine. The question seemed to catch them off guard, and for a moment, neither of them responded. Finally, my father said that Emma had asked for help, and I had never asked for an early inheritance. He said they were responding to her needs, not playing favorites. When I pointed out that I had never been told early inheritance was an option, my mother said I had always been so independent that they assumed I didn't need that kind of support. Independent. There was that word again. The word they used to justify giving me less, expecting more from me, and assuming I could handle whatever challenges came my way without their help. But independence, I was beginning to realize, had been imposed on me rather than chosen by me. I had been independent because dependence hadn't been offered as an option. The conversation grew more heated as I tried to explain how hurt I felt by the disparity in treatment. My parents became increasingly defensive, insisting that they had always loved both daughters equally, but that equal love didn't mean identical treatment. They said Emma had different needs, different circumstances, and different expectations. Then my mother said something that crystallized everything I had been feeling. She said that Emma had always needed more support because she wasn't as naturally capable as I was. She said I had always been the strong one, the one who could handle challenges independently, and that Emma required more guidance and assistance to achieve the same level of success. In that moment, I realized that my family's narrative about my independence wasn't really about my strength. It was about their comfort with giving me less. They had decided early on that I required less support, less investment, less attention, and they had rationalized this decision by framing it as a recognition of my capabilities rather than an acknowledgement of their preferences. I tried one more time to explain how the financial disparity felt like a fundamental statement about my worth in the family. I asked if they could understand why discovering a $45,000 early inheritance distribution for Emma, when they had stressed their financial limitations to me, might feel like a betrayal. That's when my father said the words that ended our relationship as I had known it. He told me I was being selfish and manipulative, trying to ruin Emma's happiness out of jealousy. He said they had given me what they thought was appropriate, and I should be grateful rather than demanding. Then he said that if I couldn't accept their decisions without creating drama, maybe I needed to reconsider how involved I wanted to be in the family. The threat was clear: accept the disparity and stay quiet, or face exclusion from the family. It was the same choice I had been making unconsciously my whole life: accept less and be grateful, or risk losing them entirely. But this time, I made a different choice. I stood up from the dinner table and told my parents that I loved them, but couldn't accept being treated as fundamentally less valuable than Emma. I said that a $45,000 disparity wasn't about different needs or circumstances, it was about different levels of investment in our futures. I told them that their pattern of expecting more from me while giving me less had been damaging my entire life, and I was no longer willing to accept it. Michael and I left that dinner, and I didn't speak to my parents for the next 3 weeks. Emma's wedding came and went without us. I heard from mutual friends that it was indeed spectacular, everything she had dreamed of and more. I also heard that my parents told people I was going through a difficult phase and had chosen not to attend due to jealousy issues. During those 3 weeks of silence, I started seeing a therapist to help me process what had happened. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that what I had experienced was a form of emotional abuse called financial manipulation, where money is used as a tool of control and favoritism. She helped me recognize that my family's pattern of expecting independence from me while providing dependence for Emma was a classic golden child or scapegoat dynamic. More importantly, she helped me understand that my worth as a person wasn't determined by my family's financial investment in my future. The fact that they had chosen to spend less money on my wedding or give me less inheritance support didn't actually say anything about my value. It said something about their capacity to see and appreciate my value. After Emma's wedding, my sister called me. She had heard about my argument with our parents and wanted to understand what had happened. I decided to be completely honest with her about what I had discovered and how it had made me feel. I expected her to be defensive or dismissive, but her reaction surprised me. Emma was quiet for a long time after I explained everything. Then she admitted that she had always known our parents treated us differently, but she had never fully understood the extent of the disparity. She said she had asked for the early inheritance because she and David wanted to buy a house after the wedding and needed additional funds, but she hadn't realized our parents had never offered me the same option. She also admitted something that shocked me. She said she had always felt guilty about the level of support she received, but she had convinced herself that I preferred being independent and didn't want help. She said our parents had always talked about how capable and strong I was, and she had assumed this meant I didn't need or want the same level of support she received. This conversation with Emma was the beginning of a slow shift in our relationship. For the first time, we talked honestly about our childhood experiences and began to recognize how our parents' favoritism had affected both of us. Emma realized that being the golden child had prevented her from developing real independence and self-confidence, while I realized that being the scapegoat had forced me to develop resilience, but had also made me accept less than I deserved. Meanwhile, my parents made several attempts to reconcile, but only on their terms. They wanted me to apologize for causing drama around Emma's wedding and to accept their explanation that they had made different decisions for different daughters based on different needs. They were not willing to acknowledge that the disparity in treatment had been hurtful or inappropriate. Dr. Martinez helped me craft a response that set clear boundaries. I wrote my parents a letter explaining that I was willing to rebuild our relationship, but only if they could acknowledge the pattern of differential treatment and commit to more equitable interactions going forward. I said I wasn't asking them to retroactively change their financial decisions, but I needed them to recognize the impact those decisions had on me and to commit to treating me with the same level of consideration they showed Emma. Their response was telling. My mother called to say she was disappointed that I was still dwelling on money issues and that my demands were unreasonable. She said they had always done their best as parents and that my expectations were unfair. My father sent a text saying that family relationships shouldn't be conditional and that my ultimatum was manipulative. Their responses confirmed what Dr. Martinez had helped me understand. They were not capable of acknowledging their behavior because doing so would require them to confront the fact that they had systematically undervalued one of their children for 28 years. Acknowledging the pattern would mean accepting responsibility for the damage it had caused, and they weren't willing to do that. This realization was heartbreaking but also liberating. I had spent my entire life trying to earn the same level of love and investment that Emma received naturally. I had convinced myself that if I could just be successful enough, independent enough, grateful enough, maybe they would see my worth and treat me accordingly. But their response to my direct request for equity showed me that the problem wasn't my worthiness, it was their inability to see it. With Dr. Martinez's guidance, I made the difficult decision to maintain limited contact with my parents until they were willing to engage in genuine reflection and change. I stopped attending family gatherings where I was expected to pretend everything was normal. I stopped calling them weekly to check in and hear about their lives. I stopped being the daughter who managed everyone's feelings and maintained family harmony at the expense of my own well-being. The change was immediate and noticeable. Within a month, my mother was calling regularly, asking when I was going to stop being stubborn and come back to family dinners. My father sent messages saying he missed me and wanted to work things out, but his idea of working things out was me accepting their behavior without any changes on their part. Emma, meanwhile, continued to evolve in her understanding of our family dynamics. She started setting her own boundaries with our parents, refusing to be the intermediary in their conflict with me, and declining to accept benefits that weren't also offered to me. When our parents tried to give her another large financial gift for her first wedding anniversary, she declined and told them she wouldn't accept anything they weren't also willing to give me. This created tension in Emma's relationship with our parents, but it also created space for a genuine relationship between Emma and me. We began talking regularly, sharing our experiences of growing up in the same house but living completely different realities. She began to understand how my supposed independence had actually been a form of neglect, while I began to understand how her favored status had been a different kind of burden. About 6 months after my wedding, something unexpected happened that validated everything I had been feeling. I received a call from the nursing director at my hospital, informing me that I had been selected to receive the Regional Excellence in Patient Care Award, a prestigious recognition given to only 5 nurses in our multi-state healthcare system each year. The award came with a $10,000 prize and recognition at a major medical conference. This was a significant professional achievement, representing years of dedicated work and exceptional patient outcomes. When I called to share the news with my parents, their response was lukewarm congratulations, followed immediately by questions about whether this meant I would be working longer hours and how Michael felt about my career focus. Compare this to their reaction when Emma's small jewelry business was featured in a local lifestyle magazine. They threw a celebration dinner and bought multiple copies to send to relatives. My regional healthcare award warranted a brief congratulations call. Emma's magazine feature warranted a party. This disparity in their responses to our achievements was the final confirmation I needed that their differential treatment wasn't about our different needs or personalities. It was about their fundamental inability to value me equally. No matter what I accomplished, no matter how significant my achievements, I would always receive less enthusiasm, less support, and less recognition than Emma. But here's what my parents didn't understand. Their lack of recognition didn't diminish my accomplishments. Their inability to see my worth didn't reduce my worth. Their choice to invest less in my future didn't limit my ability to create a successful future for myself. The award ceremony was a turning point for me. Standing on that stage, being recognized by my professional peers for excellence in patient care, I realized that the validation I had been seeking from my parents wasn't necessary for my success or happiness. I had built a career I was proud of, married a man who truly valued me, and developed the strength to set healthy boundaries with people who couldn't appreciate me, all without my parents' financial investment or emotional support. Michael and I used the award money to take our first real vacation together, a trip to Europe that we planned entirely around our own interests and dreams. We visited art museums in Paris, hiked in the Swiss Alps, and spent lazy afternoons in Italian cafes talking about our future together. It was during this trip that I truly understood how much energy I had been wasting trying to earn my parents' equal treatment and how much life I had been missing while focused on their approval. When we returned from our trip, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I invited my parents to dinner, not to reconcile on their terms, but to clearly communicate my boundaries and expectations going forward. I had realized that completely cutting them off wasn't necessary, but continuing to accept their differential treatment wasn't acceptable either. At that dinner, I explained that I was willing to maintain a relationship with them, but only within certain parameters. I would not attend family events where I was expected to pretend our conflict hadn't happened, or where my concerns were dismissed as jealousy or selfishness. I would not accept financial gifts that were significantly smaller than what they gave Emma, unless they could acknowledge the disparity and explain their reasoning. I would not continue to be the daughter who managed everyone's emotions while receiving less consideration than I gave. Most importantly, I told them that any future relationship we had would be based on mutual respect rather than obligation. If they couldn't treat me with the same level of consideration they showed Emma, then we would have a polite but distant relationship centered around major holidays and life events. Their initial reaction was predictably defensive. They accused me of being controlling, of trying to dictate their parenting choices, of making their love conditional on meeting my demands. But I had prepared for this response with Dr. Martinez's help. I explained that I wasn't trying to control their choices. I was simply communicating the consequences of those choices. They were free to continue treating me as less worthy of their investment and support, and I was free to limit my emotional investment in a relationship where I wasn't valued equally. They could choose their approach to our relationship, and I could choose my response to that approach. Over the following months, my parents gradually began to make small changes in their behavior. They started asking about my work with genuine interest rather than polite obligation. When they planned family gatherings, they began checking with both Emma and me about scheduling, rather than assuming I would accommodate whatever worked for Emma. When they gave gifts, they began making an effort to ensure the value and thoughtfulness were more equitable. These changes weren't dramatic, and they didn't erase the years of differential treatment, but they represented a beginning acknowledgement that their previous approach had been damaging. My mother even admitted during one conversation that she hadn't realized how much less attention and support she had given me over the years. She said she had always thought of me as so capable that she assumed I didn't need as much help, but she was beginning to understand that need and worth weren't the same thing. My relationship with Emma continued to strengthen as we both worked to understand and heal from our family dynamics. She began declining some of the extra support our parents offered, insisting that opportunities be extended to both of us or neither of us. She also started acknowledging, both privately and in family settings, that she had received significantly more support throughout our lives, and that this disparity hadn't been fair to me. The healing process hasn't been linear or complete. There are still moments when old patterns emerge, when my parents default to their familiar approach of expecting more from me while giving more to Emma. But now I have the awareness and boundaries to address these situations directly, rather than accepting them as normal. More importantly, I've learned that my worth isn't determined by my family's ability to recognize it. The nursing award was just the beginning. Over the past year, I've been promoted to a leadership position at my hospital, invited to speak at professional conferences, and asked to mentor new nurses in our excellence program. I've built a life filled with people who see and appreciate my value, who invest in my success because they recognize my potential. Michael and I recently bought a larger home, funded entirely by our combined savings and my career advancement. We're talking about starting our own family, about creating the kind of home where children are valued equally and supported according to their individual needs, rather than predetermined favorites. We want to break the cycle that damaged both Emma and me in different ways. I still have a relationship with my parents, but it's based on reality rather than wishful thinking. I no longer expect them to become the parents I needed them to be throughout my childhood and early adulthood. Instead, I appreciate the small changes they've made while maintaining boundaries that protect my well-being. The most important lesson I've learned through this experience is that you can't earn equal treatment from people who are committed to treating you unequally. My parents didn't give Emma more money because she deserved it more. They gave her more money because they had decided she was worth more of their investment. No amount of achievement, independence, or gratitude on my part would have changed that fundamental valuation. But here's what they missed. Their valuation was wrong. Emma and I are both valuable, both worthy of love and support and investment. Their inability to see my worth equally didn't diminish my actual worth. It just revealed their limitations as parents and as people. If you're watching this because you've experienced similar family dynamics, I want you to know that you're not alone and you're not crazy. Favoritism in families is real, and it causes real damage that persists into adulthood. You don't have to accept differential treatment in the name of family loyalty. You don't have to be grateful for scraps while watching someone else receive abundance. Your worth isn't determined by your family's financial investment in your future. Your value isn't measured by their enthusiasm for your achievements. Your potential isn't limited by their inability to see it. Setting boundaries with family members who can't treat you equitably isn't selfish. It's necessary for your mental health and personal growth. Demanding equal consideration isn't unreasonable, it's basic respect. Refusing to accept less than you deserve isn't greedy, it's self-preservation. The journey from family disappointment to personal empowerment isn't easy, but it's worth it. When you stop wasting energy trying to earn equal treatment from people committed to inequality, you free up that energy to build relationships with people who see your worth clearly and invest in your success enthusiastically. You deserve to be valued, supported, and celebrated. If your family can't provide that, you can create it for yourself with friends, partners, and chosen family members who recognize your true worth. Your life doesn't have to be limited by their limitations. I'd love to hear from others who have navigated similar family dynamics. Have you experienced favoritism or financial manipulation in your family? How did you learn to value yourself when family members couldn't value you equally? Please share your experiences in the comments. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these struggles is the first step toward healing. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to support more content about family healing, boundary setting, and personal empowerment. Your engagement helps create a community where people can share their experiences and support each other through difficult family situations. Remember, you are worthy of equal love, equal support, and equal investment in your future. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, not even family.